Hey guys, this is John. Welcome back to another round of the Lone Wolf League. This is season 37, round 5. This is an 11-round online tournament on Lee Chess at Classical Time Controls. And this is my very first time participating in the league. And we're getting close to halfway through. So congratulations to my opponent from last week. It was Happy Mode, this player here. And if you saw that video, if not, maybe spoiler, maybe you should pause this right now. But if you saw that video, I did lose to Happy Mode, or in other words, Happy Mode beat me. They fully earned the victory, of course. It was a fascinating game, really sharp. And as a result of that, Happy Mode has moved into clear first place. Okay, so Happy Mode is the only player on 4 out of 4 in this, I think, 244 player field. Yeah. Again, I can't even scroll down all the way on the screen capture here, but there's 244 players in this open section, and Happy Mode is atop the leaderboard with 4 out of 4. There's some players with 3.5 out of 4 as well. Actually, quite a few players, 10 of them, it looks like. And then we get into the threes. So this is kind of how it goes in a big Swiss-style tournament where you get paired with players in your score group. You tend to see players bunched up at certain scores, especially early on in the tournament. So here I am in 13th place, but really the place with a big tie in the score group like this doesn't matter, especially this early. There are a lot of threes is what I was getting at. So all the way down here, yeah, all the way down to 35th place. That's how many players have 3 points or higher. So 11-round tournament. I still want to try to fight for first place. Of course, I don't control my own destiny at this point as a result of that loss. But hey, I can still do some damage, and we're going to continue to give every game in this league our all. And I've really been enjoying playing these games for you guys, recording the preparation, just laying it all out there. So this week, to cut to the chase, I am playing Wilsonia, this player right here in the 29th position. Wilsonia, rated 2232. Looks like they had a couple half-point buys, but they've won their last 2 games. So technically undefeated in the league. Okay, so let's get into my preparation against Wilsonia. Hope you guys enjoy this video, and please leave a comment. Let me know what you think about the league, this game, anything. All right, thanks, guys. Let's roll the tape. Okay, so there's about 30 minutes before the round starts. We'll try to get in our customary 15 to 20 minutes of prep, and then we'll play the game. I'm feeling decent today, a little bit tired, but nothing too crazy. We're going to be playing this game in the afternoon. This is my opponent's profile, Wilsonia. Looks like they might have their name in their profile. FIDE rating, most importantly, 2085 from England. And looks like this player plays in, I assume these are leagues. I recognize the 4 NCL. That's an over-the-board league. I don't know about the other stuff, but given the strong league chess culture in Europe, I wouldn't be surprised if someone in the Lone Wolf League plays in lots of other over-the-board leagues too. So, okay, let's take a look at Wilsonia's games. I did see on the standings that this player, I think, took 2 buys and then won their previous 2 games. So their most recent 2 games. So they're undefeated so far. And strong classical rating. Yeah, mid 2200s, 2300 rapid, blitz, bullet, 2100s. And yeah, let's take a look at those classical games first. Let's just see what they've been up to in the league. So I do have the black pieces, but as I've said before, in preparation for these games, I like to see what the opponent plays as white a little bit too. I don't spend too much time on it, but I do like to see that. Okay, so looks like in this game they played in English as white per their country of origin. And in this other game, they actually faced the bird. That's a bit unusual. Okay. I'm just going really quickly through these games just to try to glean anything I can from their play style, what they've been up to in the league so far. This game looks kind of chaotic. Looks like white was winning in this one, better if not winning in the middle game, and then blundered a rook, maybe? Bishop takes h5, blundering queen takes c6. Let's go back to that other game real quick, because I did go through that pretty fast. Yeah, this English. Let's see this from Wilsonia's point of view. I play this stuff as well. Oh, okay. So offered the pawn on c4, which black took, but then the bishop on e4 got trapped. This piece here. Still looks kind of messy, though. So interesting. So how did this get away from Wilsonia? So in this position, Wilsonia played knight takes f5 instead of knight takes e4. Knight takes e4, or maybe bishop takes e4. Probably knight takes e4, keep the pawn on h3. That just seems to win a piece, right? Just verify. Yeah, it does. Either of those moves are good. But Wilsonia got fancy and played knight takes f5. And then was worse, but ended up winning this game. Okay. Also, you can see the comments to this. I just thought it would be cool to get a bishop to e6, but you can play around it. Yeah, we all been there before where we have a good position and then we think, oh, this looks cool to do. Let's try it. And then your position suddenly isn't so good anymore. Okay, this was a 45 plus 15 game that Wilsonia played against an IM about a month ago. Okay, so this is more up my alley. I'm going to look at this from the white side. So this is an exchange QGD. Yeah, this is exactly the type of stuff that I play as white. This is all known, in fact. So a lot of people play the QGD as black. Queen's Gambit declined. And I've always liked this exchange variation. Taking on d5 and then playing bishop g5. There's a number of ways that you can handle this. Okay, so yeah, Wilsonia played this knight h5 line. Yeah, this is all super standard stuff. I'm going to throw the engine on because I'm kind of curious where this game hinged. It did end in a draw. But given that I could see myself playing something similar, if not identical to this, against this player, I want to know kind of what went on. And this looks comfortable for white. I would certainly play this. Looks like taking the bishop is a bit better according to the engine. Usually white wants to work up to e4. Queen g3, work up to that e4 move. What's the time management in this game? Well, Sonia playing pretty fast. So is their opponent. Yeah, I mean, I think white definitely had a nice position in this one. This endgame looks nice for white. Black has a strong knight on d6, but for sure white is pressing here. But they ended up repeating and getting a draw. Okay, so Wilsonia plays this QGD exchange. Yeah. I could play this way. Queen c2 stops bishop f5. You can also play e3. Sometimes they transpose. E3 does give black the option of bishop f5, although then there's queen f3. But the game within the game. So what I'm thinking is, for sure, if Wilsonia has looked at my games, they're going to know that I play this from the white side. And this is a pretty heavily theoretical line where I think black should be fine. But I have online games. I have multiple over-the-board games in this line. I know sometimes I've castled queenside here. So I might look at that a little more, but I still want to get a better picture of Wilsonia's repertoire. Here's a game where they played e4 as white. That's interesting. They played the Petrov against e4 as black. They played the Dutch in this game, 45 plus 15. You know, these could be training games. I don't know exactly why they played that time control, but could be training, could be serious, could be part of a league. Okay, so yeah, I wouldn't mind facing a Dutch. Now we're getting pretty far back. Just looking for more games where they played from the black side. Here they played d4, knight f6. So it looks like Wilsonia does mix it up fairly often. Here's another QGD. Looks like he mixes it up fairly often in the opening. Yeah, this is more a traditional QGD where white does not take on d5 so early. Looks like black was fine in this one. Okay. Yeah, so I think what I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to load up the Lichess database. This is probably the #1 tool to keep in mind when you're preparing for a player on Lichess. You can click over to the third tab over here. This was my opponent from last week, Happy Mode. So I can just change this to Wilsonia. I think it actually auto selects, players whose like profile or game you've clicked on. So that's kind of handy. So Wilsonia is black. Let's take a look. Lots of games on Lichess. I think I saw Wilsonia has played for 55 days on Lichess. It's always a funny stat. You can see for yourself how much of your life you've devoted to playing on Lichess. Okay, what does Wilsonia do against knight f3? Most players who play QGD don't have trouble against this move because they just play d5. What if g3? Some sort of fianchetto system. Yeah. This, probably the best white has is to go into a Catalan at some point. c4. Not super keen to go into this. I mean, maybe if I saw some really lopsided statistics here, but there's a lot of theory. I'm not very up to date on it. Probably wouldn't go for that. So let's just say we stick to straight up d4. Okay, knight f6, d5, e6. Yeah, I mean, look at all the different moves that Wilsonia has played here. And by the way, if your name is public in your profile like this player, not a bad idea, assuming you're rolling like that, to throw in random moves, or especially lines that are legitimate that you don't play very often in over-the-board play or serious play. So maybe that's what this player does. I mean, there's what, like a dozen different moves listed here that they played against d4. Could be just messing around in bullet or whatever, but it's a good strategy if you're going to have your name public. Okay, knight f6, e6. Does Wilsonia go into Nimzo? Yes, they do. There's some recent games in the Nimzo. Yeah, this is from 4 months ago. 5+5 game. This was a blitz game. Not sure they play any super long time control with this. Yeah, I would probably go for knight f3 on move 3 instead of playing against the Nimzo. But again, for a QGD player, that's not a big deal. They can play d5 if they want. Okay, knight c3, bishop e7. Yeah, it looks like Wilsonia has a lot of experience here. Stats are pretty good for white, but they do have a lot of experience in this type of position. I'm just curious, just playing through. I mean, I could play this stuff without huge amounts of prep. Like, that's no problem. Wouldn't mind getting a position like this. Just play against the IQP. Looks like white is solidly better here, according to the engine. Knight takes c5. Looks like you can actually take this pawn, huh? Knight e4. This could be some sort of theory. White played queen c4, but yeah, a3 to cover b4. That looks logical. And if rook d8, play queen e5 and look to trade queens. Uh-huh. Yeah. I mean, based on the computer eval, I wouldn't think that this is a line that Wilsonia would prepare. But there's also knight takes e7, which doesn't look like anything too concerning for black. So, I don't know. I could try to find some wrinkle in the QGD, whether it's the exchange or one of these delayed c takes d5 lines. Somehow I'm not incredibly thrilled to play something like that. What about against c4? What does Wilsonia do? I think I played c4 in the first round of this season against Terror MT. Again, for a QGD player, they could just play e6 here. The QGD is a pretty robust opening in terms of defenses against d4, c4, knight f3. You can more or less do the same thing if you want and claim that the best white can do is play d4 somewhere. I'm just taking a look. I'm curious if, white plays something like e3, tries to withhold d4. How does this player treat this type of position? So we could do something like this, fianchetto the bishop. I have experience with that. But if black more or less plays in the center, it's completely fine. Completely fine. Knight f6, inviting e4. Yeah, hard to say. I mean, c4, I'm not seeing a clear tendency here. Again, this player does a really good job of mixing up their openings. They play this King's English, and it looks like they might have some experience from the white side too. I could go for something like this, bishop b4. They've got a fair amount of games with this. Yeah, in terms of player type, they look solid. They're a good player. FIDE's over 2,000. They looked a bit shaky in those first two games. So this is another player I wouldn't mind sharpening the struggle against and doing it in a selective way, like not coming out of the gate looking for a fight. But, I mean, here, this game, knight g8, looking for f5, I feel like they're not afraid to mix it up if they get the chance. So if I can play in a way where I offer to mix it up and I actually invite that, hey, maybe that would work out in my favor. But still, I'm a little uncertain what opening I want to go for. c4. My fear is if I open with d4 that we're just going to get some highly theoretical QGD line where, from the looks of it, they have pretty good experience with a number of different variations. And we're going to be following theory for quite a few moves. But again, they mix it up a lot. Okay, let's just play through this main line here. Queen c2, h6, knight d7. Yeah, there's also this queen c2 move they faced. Yeah, castles, bishop g4, knight bd7. I'm not really getting a clear bead on what types of QGD positions Wilsonia likes to play. Just that there's a lot of theory in these, and they played a bunch of stuff. This position, I think we can play bishop g3 here, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that a move with the idea that if knight h5, there's... no, knight takes d5 doesn't work. Sometimes this is a trap, but there's bishop b4 check, and then the queen gets loose. Yeah. Again, could go for this. If we look in the Masters database, there'll be plenty of games. White usually castles short. And I play with knight f3 a lot too. So what does this player do there? Knight h5, rook e8. Let's just see how they handled this. I played this position many times before. I don't know. It's hard to create problems for black here, especially if they're expecting this. I don't think I'm going to go for a QGD exchange. Despite some of the things I'm seeing, I'm not quite feeling that line of play for some reason. Although in this game, white got a good position, but this was a blitz game. Yeah, so we're coming up on 10, 15 minutes before the game, so I want to make a decision pretty quickly, pretty soon about what I'm going to do. I'm intrigued by c4, despite all the different things that Wilsonia plays. Maybe I'll look at knight f3 again. But knight f3, it's hard to get around d5 just being a good response, because I really do believe d4 for white in response is pretty much the best thing you can do there. I mean, I could start with c4, and if we get a King's English, I'm pretty happy with that. I could play g3 or knight c3 here. Looks like here they actually have some predictability. At d5. These games are from a while ago. Bishop b4. Yeah, there's interesting stuff here. If black takes, I think usually you want to take with the d pawn, is my understanding. No, b pawn. Well, okay, both have been played. Thought d pawn in this situation, but looks like more master games go b takes c3. And this resembles a Nimzo Indian, but I kind of like the play that white has here because even with the doubled pawns, you can work up to f4 and some slow kingside push. Okay. E4. I always have mixed feelings about e4 because it weakens the d4 square. Good to have some ideas in mind, though. How did Famiano play this position? Went for f4. Okay, yeah. This might fit the bill. I mean, this could give some dynamic chances in a late opening, early middle game scenario. Even though the engine says that's an inaccuracy, it's a fine move. It's theory. And this would, I think, guarantee that we're not going to play something highly theoretical. I don't believe they're going to be extensively prepared for c4. So I think I'm going to go with this. And now it's 12:49 p.m. for me. Game's at 1 o'clock. So trying to zero in on what I'm going to play. Yeah, and of course, it's not worth preparing against all these moves. But if knight f6, what am I going to do? Because I could play knight c3. But then e6 begs the question, do I want to play d4 and just agree to play a Nimzo or QGD? Or should I try to keep it in offbeat territory? Could play e4, but there is some theory here after d5, which I don't know if Wilsonia knows, but I haven't really played this much. Based on this, though, it kind of looks like they wing it. d4 I know is a move. There's like theory like this. And I could play this. I could go for this. That's not a problem. Okay, so I think I'm going to play c4. And if knight f6, I'm probably not going to try to transpose to a QGD or Nimzo. Same thing against e6. In the case that they play e6, I think I'll play probably knight c3 here. And if d5, maybe e3. And just keep the pawn back. We'll see what type of position we get out of that. Looks like they haven't faced that in a long time. Could produce some UGA type position. Queen's Gambit accepted. But oftentimes white goes knight f3, b3, bishop b2. Out of that sort of thing. And if e5, I think I'll play g3. We'll get this. We'll see if black goes d5. There's also c6. Doesn't look like that's super popular, but that is a move. Yeah, if knight c6, knight c3, bishop b4. Could play knight d5, but I might go for this e4 move. I'm intrigued by this. And I've seen a couple examples where b takes or d takes has been played if black captures. The last thing I'm going to do is just look at a couple other games that Wilsonia has played in this line. Again, I got to watch the d4 square if I do this sort of thing, but you can play d3, you can play h3. You can shore up that square. It's not a problem. Something like this. And long term, white often looks to play on the king side. That's what happens. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about this. I think this is not a bad plan. You want to avoid a position like this, though. This is more in the style of a Nimzo, so you want to keep this structure flexible if you take it on. Okay, I'm going to wrap here, so I have a few minutes just to get some coffee before this game starts. Interesting player. They play a lot of different stuff. I feel like I don't have a super strong read about how this opening is going to go, but at the same time, they might be thinking the same thing about me because I have been mixing it up in this league, and I got a few ideas in mind, a little bit of a direction, but we're going to see how this one goes. I'm going to play the English, though. All right, see you guys again soon for the game. All right, and we are off. Let's tell our opponent good luck. Have fun as always. Strap in. Let's open with c4 as planned. Can't resist playing the English against someone from England, right? Maybe that's why I wanted to do it. We'll see. Yes, good luck to Wilsonia. Oh, I like the camel emote. I like that. It's a battle between the shark and the camel. Land versus water. Who's going to win? Maybe it'll be a draw. Okay, and they meet c4 with e6. So this is one of the moves I was debating how I'd respond to. Didn't fully flesh it out, but I had some ideas. I thought knight c3 here, and if d5, I don't have to go into a QGD exchange. Now, Wilsonia might be thinking that it may be my plan to do so. What I could also do, though, I could play knight f3 and on d5 then play e3. That might actually be a bit more flexible. So I'm slightly tempted to do that to guard the c-pawn. Yeah, because if I play knight c3, I'm going to do that. If I play knight c3, d5, e3, I'm not quite sure about c5 with the idea of rushing through d4. Maybe I'll show that in the analysis afterwards, but bit of a game time decision. But I do think this is a little more flexible than knight c3, given that they opened with e6. But we'll find out. It didn't look like c4 surprised Wilsonia. So that's worth pointing out. Okay, and knight f6. Yeah, and black may be looking to see if I reveal my hand, whether I'm going to go d4 or not. So now I could play e3, or I could go to the knight c3 move. I think this would be a better time to play knight c3 if I don't mind d5. I think I probably will play that. It gives Wilsonia a chance to also mix it up. I would expect d5, but d5 is not forced. But let's play knight c3. Expecting d5. I'd be very happy to see bishop b4 here, by the way. That's like a pseudo Nimzo Indian. Yeah, and black plays d5. So QGD, mainline QGD would be on the table if I played d4. But that's not part of my game plan. So I'm going to play this e3 move and defend the pawn on c4. Okay, recording looks good. Drink check, by the way. I said I was going to get coffee before the game started. This is actually decaf coffee. Sorry to disappoint you guys. I already had a nice large glass of, or mug of coffee this morning. And we're playing this game in the early afternoon, so I don't feel like I need more. So I got my decaf coffee. I've got my lemon ginger tea. And triple beverage today. I've got some water as well. Just some good old water. So I'm going to simul these beverages throughout this game, starting with the decaf coffee. Coming off a loss last week, I don't think that'll be a spoiler to anyone watching this video. If you made it this far into the video and into what is this, round 5 of the tournament, you probably know what happened to me in round 4. Congratulations again to my opponent in that game, Happy Mode. They played an excellent game and rightfully punished my rook takes b2 check sacrifice in that one. Again, I'm spoiling this a bit, so pause this video and go watch the other one if you missed it. But yeah, they rightfully punished me in that game. And I was disappointed afterwards, but hey, it's hard to be disappointed when you largely played what you feel to be a good game. And I just came up short in the end. And I think it was largely due to my time management. You know, I just didn't leave myself enough time to properly, as I put in one of the comments, refute my own idea with that rook takes b2 move. And Happy Mode is a great player and fully took advantage, which is huge credit to them because it's not easy to play against an IM who has a lot of eyeballs on their game. And Happy Mode just really stayed calm in that moment and punished me. But my time management's got to be better this week is kind of what I'm getting at. So bishop e7. Yeah, and now I could go for the fianchetto if I want. I could play queen c2. Well, Sonia did pause a little bit before that move. So I think queen c2 is a little more flexible here. But b3 is completely within the realm of possibility as well. I'm going to go queen c2, though. Let's post the queen on a flexible square. So the reason I'm withholding this d-pawn advance is that in doing so, I refrain from engaging black in the center beyond the c4 and d5 tension. I leave open this diagonal for the dark square bishop, this a1, h8 diagonal. And now that black has castle kingside, I can look to set that up with b3, bishop b2. So I think that's probably what I'm going to do. You can also go rook g1 and g4. You can play for some fun stuff with g4 in these types of positions. So I'm going to keep that in mind as well. Yeah, let's play b3. The computer is never that enamored by withholding d4 in these positions. I'm quite confident the computer is going to say that this is equal or maybe even slightly better for black in some cases. But I want one of these positions I was describing where it's not so theoretical. I have a chance to make the position dynamic and maybe catch Wilsonia in some sharp position. Maybe they overextend, get too optimistic, but that's not, necessarily going to happen. Okay, plays c5, so no messing around. Black is just taking the center. Makes a lot of sense. Might compel me to go for d4 in some cases too, by the way. Okay, so I could try to play bishop b2 and then entice d4. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of that plan because I think black can play down the middle pretty easily. So bishop b2, let's say knight c6, and just go from there. So my best option might be to take on d5 and then play d4 and just look to play one of these IQP positions. Again, that's kind of getting into territory I would prefer to avoid if I can. But yeah, this is one of the better ways for black to handle this. Can maybe postpone a decision with bishop e2 for a moment, but knight c6 is a very standard looking reply for black. And I don't know that I want to let them think about d4 for too long, because if black ever gets in d4 followed by e5, starts supporting the center, I don't think white has much to work with there. So that might be an argument for taking and then playing d4 myself. Knight c6, take on c5, bishop takes c5. There's the possibility the game could liquidate kind of quickly, though, if black tries to go for a quick d4. So I'm just going to pause for a moment and consider my options. If I play d4 right here, it gives black too many chances to give me potentially weak structure, like a hanging pawn structure. I've seen some examples where white takes on d5 and plays bishop d3 as well. It's interesting. But taking on d5 and playing d4 would be the absolute standard thing to do here. Just thinking if I do that, trade on d5, black takes with the pawn, I play d4. If black goes knight c6, what am I doing at that point? Because that puts a great deal of pressure on the d4 point. And I would like to keep some tension, but it might just be difficult at that point. And then you could argue my queen is maybe a little misplaced. Take, d4, knight c6. Take on c5, pretty much forced, I think. Don't think I'm worried about d4 in that position. That should work out just fine for me. So bishop takes c5, we'll say. Maybe I can play something like knight b5 there. Attack the bishop. Bishop b4 check, bishop d2. Not sure I quite buy it, though. Looks like black's going to be fine. So backup option to taking on d5 is the bishop b2 move. But after knight c6, I'm going to be more or less in the same scenario. Again, I'm skeptical to allow this e5 followed by, or d4 followed by e5 idea. When I've done that in the past, just hasn't worked out all that well. Could take on d5, play bishop b2, and then on knight c6, maybe play a3. Rules out knight b4. Again, there's a question, though, of d4. What am I doing? Maybe there's some opportunity for knight a4, although it's looking a little odd. Just not sure I buy like taking in d4, knight c6, and this whole line I was mentioning with the capture on c5. I think in those lines, I'd rather have my bishop on b2 and my queen on d1. One other move, d4, I mentioned, but I just don't like the various ways black can capture and fully liquidate the center. Yeah, so I'm leaning towards taking on d5 and playing bishop b2 for flexibility. And then on knight c6, maybe a3. I haven't made up my mind, but maybe a3. Yeah, I think I'm going to do that. So let's take. And I assume pawn takes. I mean, black might take with the knight, but I would assume pawn takes. Not very happy with the position I've got so far, as you can probably tell from my time management. But in this, yeah, okay, black takes with the knight. I'm happy to see that. In this type of scenario, I can't read into that too much. So if pawn takes, I was going to have to play pretty quickly. Bishop b2 and not compound the problem. So black takes with the knight. Yeah, great example of thinking for a long time about the move that didn't even happen. So I feel this gives me more flexibility because d4 is not staring me in the face anymore. Maybe I'll be happy to take on d5 now. Because when d4 doesn't come with tempo in the future, it's very nice. So the only thing about taking on d5 is I do give black the option of connecting their pawns again. But if I don't take the knight, I got to watch knight b4. And I'm not convinced I want to play a3 against this move. Knight takes d5. So I'm thinking take on d5. Maybe I could postpone this for one move, bishop b2, but I'm thinking take. So knight takes d5, pawn takes d5, bishop b2. Let's say knight c6. Maybe then a3. Could throw in bishop d3 somewhere. Maybe actually. Take d5, bishop b2, knight c6, throw in bishop d3. Because if knight b4, bishop takes h7, check. King h8, queen b1, let's say. Black cannot play g6, which should be quite convenient for me. So just a big question. Do I want to take on d5 or not? Again, if I don't, bishop b2, knight b4, queen b1 might be okay. Bishop b2, what if knight c6? Then I play a3? Does that ever make things too easy for black? I don't know. Maybe I'm coming around to that because it's hard for black to put a rook on c8. That takes some time. Something like b6. I can go bishop d3 in the meantime, maybe. Okay, let's play bishop b2. I'll wait for a moment on this knight takes d5 decision. Not going to sweat about knight b4 too much. I think queen b1 is fine. Just keep an eye on the d3 square. And I would expect knight c6 here, but by no means the only move. Once again. So let's use this time to think about knight c6, what I'm going to do against that. Because I could take d5, could play a3. Leaning towards a3, even though I initially dismissed that, because A lot of times with your queen lined up with the knight on the c-file like this in a Maroczy type position where black has a pawn on c5, if they can quickly play their rook to the c-file, you have to watch stuff like knight d4, knight b4. But looking at it again, that's a long ways off from for black. So I don't think I need to worry about that anytime soon. And if I meet knight c6 with a3, I'm arguably playing like a hedgehog type position without the pawn on d3. But I like the direction this could go. I feel like I might have some opportunities towards that black king, even if I also castle short. So we'll see. Immediate goal, though, try to find some game plan that keeps some tension and doesn't put me in the hole time-wise too much, because I'm already behind 5-6 minutes. Not what we want coming off of last week. So knight c6, a3. Let's say b6 at that point. I think b6 is a good assumption. Maybe bishop d3. Looks interesting. It blocks the d-pawn, but could be interesting. Maybe also takes on d5 and then bishop d3. Another option. But I like bishop d3 as a base case. Get that bishop firing away towards that black king side. Black will probably play h6 there. So I'm looking at knight c6, a3, b6, bishop d3, hit the pawn on h7, h6, and then what? I probably won't castle queenside. That seems a little too much. But maybe there's some universe where I could pull it off. I could maybe play something like knight e4, although I got to watch bishop knight b4. That's the thing. If I keep both knights on the board, both black knights, knight b4 could be a thing, even with having played a3. If I have my bishop on d3. So knight c6, a3, pawn b6, bishop d3, h6. Let's just say castles, bishop b7. I don't know. Not seeing much there. The position's fine, but I'm not seeing much in the way of an attack. Maybe I don't want that d-pawn hindered. Even though black has a nice grip on the d4 square, maybe I don't want that. Black does play knight c6. Yeah, I think I'm going to play a3. I'm going to do it pretty quickly, too. I'm already thinking about it. I think I need it in most every case to guard the b4 square. So b6 for black would be normal. Maybe b6, I just settle for bishop e2. Bishop b7, castle. And perhaps look for something in the center. Thing is, though, black might have this bishop f6 move at some point, which just may not give me very much. And there's the knight e4 move I mentioned. You can consider that. Consider playing that way. b6, knight e4. It looks kind of weak, though. It even gives black a license to perhaps consider f5. Not sure I'd buy it. But an advantage to playing a3 right away is if I think I need that move, it's good just to play it. And again, black might not play b6. They already surprised me with knight takes d5. So they might not even play b6. But still worth using my time to figure out what I'm going to do about that, because it looks pretty likely. The light square bishop is the only minor piece not yet in the game for black. So I think stands to reason that they're going to want to include that in the action soon. Bishop d7 doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So they want that bishop working somehow. Let's say b6, bishop d3, h6. I would love to rearrange my queen and bishop to attack h7, but that's tough to pull off. Yeah, black does play b6. So bishop d3, h6. Do I go for something like knight e2? I'm not sure what that knight maneuver really accomplishes, though. Don't quite buy it for me. Remember, I could always switch it up and take on d5 as well. It's not a bad option, too. Maybe knight takes d5, e takes d5, bishop b5. Develop with tempo. Still, there's bishop b7. But maybe I could play something like knight takes d5, pawn takes d5, bishop b5, bishop b7, castles, and then look to play d4 somewhere. Look to just line up d4, quite simply. Knight takes d5, pawn takes d5. Do I throw in bishop d3 or not? I think bishop d3 is going to compel black to play h6. I don't really want to play g6 and have to deal with more scope from my dark square bishop, so knight takes d5, pawn takes d5, bishop b5, bishop b7. Castles, rook c8. Maybe I could go queen f5 somewhere. Looks kind of interesting in these lines. Yeah, maybe open the center up in a slightly unexpected way. Or shift the queen over somehow. This all looks rather interesting to me. Knight takes d5 and then bishop b5. I'm just not seeing much pan out with bishop d3. Could play bishop b5 first if I want to be more flexible. I think I'm going to take, though. Try to stay above 20 minutes for now. So capture, open the bishop. And who knows, maybe on pawn takes d5, bishop b5, black will mix it up and play bishop to d7. Maybe they'll decide to defend the knight in that way. I probably wouldn't mind facing that because I feel like the bishop might be a little misplaced there. By the way, in these lines, taking bishop b5, and again, black surprises me, takes with the queen. Takes with the queen. Okay, so this begs the question, what happens on bishop c4? Or maybe bishop d3 and then bishop e4. Bishop d3, bishop e4. So bishop d3. If h6, bishop e4, queen d7, I mean, already there's knight e5. That looks kind of sketchy for black. They might lose an exchange. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe that's okay. Knight takes e5, bishop takes a8, knight d3 check. Doesn't look like something you want to allow, though. Looks a little odd. I can also throw in bishop h7 and then bishop e4. Try to make it even stronger. I'm not sure I'd buy queen takes d5. So these are my two candidate moves against that. Bishop d3, bishop c4. Leaning bishop d3. That just seems to make a lot of sense. Hit the pawn. Look to quickly transfer the bishop to e4. Maybe black will go queen h5, but then there's stuff like g4 I can think about. That starts to look pretty darn dangerous for black. Queen takes g4, rook g1. Yeah, that might not work out well at all for black. Then I might be castling queenside. And if bishop d3, f5, I feel like bishop c4 is even stronger. Yeah, let's go bishop d3. Again, I'm going to try not to think about this too much. That looks strong. I mean, maybe black calculated this. h6, bishop e4, and then queen d6, queen d7, but it looks odd to allow. I wouldn't think you'd want to do this. Allow knight e5 type stuff. But I admit, concretely, I might not be able to take advantage of that. We'll see. But I would just not even consider this line of play for black. I would have taken with the pawn there every day and twice on Sunday. But this is what we've seen in this series. And you can expect this in your chess career overall. So sometimes you might just be sweating on certain moves, racking your brain, calculating. But if you're pretty sure you're going to play something and you see like multiple responses that you think your opponent could play and you're really sweating like all the different permutations, you should usually just play the move that you think you're going to play, because it's remarkable how often your opponent doesn't cooperate, so to speak. And you might be pleasantly surprised by that. So that's kind of what's shaping up here. I don't think I had a great position after 5-6 moves in this game with white. I don't know if I was worse, but I wasn't liking the position I got on my prep in this one. But knight takes d5 and now queen takes d5. Both surprised me. Black seems adamant about keeping this pawn on e6, which I would not have anticipated. And I'm saying this like I have an edge. I don't know if I even have an edge here, but I'm liking this position a lot more than the e takes d5 stuff. It just seems like I have much more activity here compared to those lines. So I'll be curious what black does. I think black should play h6. I would kind of doubt if another move was better than this. Maybe f5. I could see the appeal of f5, just definitively try to block the bishop. But it's such a weakening move. Bishop c4, play against that pawn on... Yeah, black does play h6. So here, do I try to send my bishop to e4 in some way? And if I do I throw in bishop h7 first? That would be my instinct. So bishop h7, king h8, then bishop e4. That's a little dance you can do to force your opponent's king over a bit. Weakens their control over f7, for instance. They also step in the line of sight here. So bishop h7, king h8, bishop e4. Let's say queen d6. I've got some fun stuff there. I mean, knight e5 for one thing, but I think a move like d4 might just be better there. d4, try to open the center at an awkward moment for black. Maybe I'm even in a position to castle queenside after that. Maybe. Yeah, I might not take too long on this move. I'm really liking bishop h7. I don't see a compelling reason to play bishop e4 first. I think bishop h7 is only going to help me compared to bishop e4 immediately. So bishop h7, king h8, bishop e4, queen d6. Let's say d4, because then if pawn takes d4, I can take on c6. I don't know. I'm just liking that. I think my rook can come over to d1 pretty easily. Maybe I'll even castle, like I said. I think I should be able to get a little something out of this, if not a large initiative. So let's go check. I'm going to pre-move bishop e4, almost pre-move. Let's see where black steps. I mean, I think queen d6 will be played. There's some cases where I might take and think about playing knight e5 as well. We're seeing the potential on the long diagonal come up. But I'm not quite there. I need a little more coordination to make this work. So there's d4 I was mentioning. There's also b4 I can maybe think about. I think these moves will be met by bishop b7, though, it must be said. So d4, bishop b7. Let's say pawn takes on c5, queen takes, bishop takes, maybe b4, bishop back to e7. I've got pressure there, knight e5 even, or rook c1 first, rook c1, rook c8. Question is, can I make anything of that? It looks good. It looks good. But what can I actually do with all that? So do I want d4 or do I want b4? If I'm going for this. I'm thinking d4 still. d4 is my instinct. And am I missing anything towards g7? Any sort of tactics? Seems tough to pull off. And if I take, I really got to be certain that I'm getting something out of that because my bishop is too strong to part with when black's knight is pinned. But yeah, knight e5 I'm not liking because I think knight takes e5, bishop takes a8, knight d3 check is just a good answer. There's bishop e5, to be fair. That might be a slightly improved version of that, but I still don't quite like it. And black just might respond with queen to d7, keep the knight protected. So yeah, leaning towards d4. I just want to have something in mind against bishop b7, like a ideally multi-move continuation, because I think that move is highly probable, and it's going to shape how this middle game goes. So take on c5, queen takes c5, queen takes, bishop takes. Maybe I just castle queenside at that point. Maybe I just do that. Rook gets in the action. I can tuck my king on b1. Black can go for f5 in some cases, but they're looking really weak on those long diagonals. And stuff like taking c6, knight e5 somewhere could be good. Yeah, let's go d4. There is this bishop a6 move black could play to try to prevent me from castling short. But the downside is black takes their eye off the knight on c6. So I didn't calculate that fully, but I think taking on c5 and rook d1, even bishop d3 if I absolutely need it, that feels like it should work for me. I could also castle queenside. Bishop a6, castle queenside. So switching it up and playing d4 after all. I didn't think I'd be playing this move in the opening. But we're getting more into the middle game now, 14 moves in. Recording looks good. Everything looking solid. Hopefully my position too. Yeah, I don't think the engine's going to be happy about my opening in this one. But we have plenty of time to talk about that later. Let's actually try to play a good game of chess first. So expecting bishop b7. Not sure what other moves I really would consider here as black. I would consider the bishop a6 move briefly, but I don't really buy it. Yeah, bishop b7 played. So do I take c5? And on queen takes c5, how is this going to go down? Because we were looking at this trade option. And I think I was liking castles at the end of the day, which opens up rook d8, opens up b4. I like that my rook gets involved just right away from d8. Black's minor pieces feel like they're getting trampled a little bit. Yeah, pretty sure I'll take c5. Don't think knight e5 really fits the bill. There's even some questions if black could take and then pin me on the c file. Yeah, I'm going to capture on c5. Offer a trade of queens, but this queenless middle game looks promising to me. I think I'm going to have an edge. My minor pieces are all well placed. Black needs to try to neutralize those pieces somehow. It seems tough to do. So queen takes c5, queen takes c5, bishop takes c5. Black wants to take with the b pawn. I'm cool with that too. But bishop takes c5. I can't win a piece with b4 followed by b5 because black will have bishop a5 at the end. But I can keep b4 in reserve. Right? There's no rush to play that move. So that's why I'm thinking after the trade of queens, I castle long. Threaten rook d7. There's some ideas percolating, like the knight e5 move. Maybe in some cases. I mean, there's also the question after the queen trade, can I play knight e5 right away? I think not, because they can take b7. There's knight d3 check. Yeah, well, I don't know. Knight takes, knight e5. Hits a number of points. Still, castle's queenside looks better. Is there anything with rook c1 after I take on c5? Nah, probably not. Okay, so just one thing I'm calculating is takes, castle's queenside. If black puts a rook on d8, let's say rook a to d8 at that point. Looks like a logical move. Concretely, what am I doing there to cause problems? b4, let's say, bishop e7. Or could I play... I think I might have something towards f7 somewhere. Okay, let's take the queen. Because I'm not making any progress on any other moves, so let's just play it. Still thinking about my next move, but maybe black will take with a pawn. Again, per this theme we're talking about, expect the unexpected. If they get worried about the c-file stuff for some reason, they might take with the pawn, but I expect the bishop takes. So bishop takes c5, castle's queenside, rook a to d8. It's still hard to pull off the knight e5 move with the black knight on c6, because I think black can always just take, and there's knight d3 coming. So bishop takes c5, castle's queenside, rook a to d8. Let's say b4 there, bishop e7. And then what about knight d4 in that position? Knight d4. A rook c8, and if king b1, rook a to d8. Yeah, a lot of trades possible there. I think even in some endgames, I might be a little bit better. But there are trade possibilities for sure. Could castle short, but I do feel like castling queenside is the thing here. I want my king a little closer to the action. Can look at knight e5 again for a moment. It feels premature to play this, but knight takes e5, bishop takes b7. Let's say rook b8. Then I can pull the bishop back to e4. I'm going to be better there with the two bishops. So knight e5, knight takes e5, bishop takes b7, knight d3, I think is the critical thing. King e2. And if knight takes b2, I am seeing that I can take on a8 at the end. and play a move like rook a2 to trap the knight. So knight e5, I mean, that might be a decent move straight away. And I'm just thinking of lines like if knight e5, black can't play rook f to c8 because I take on f7 with check. So they're likely going to have to play rook a to c8 if they want to defend the knight. But that leaves open the possibility of knight d7 if I want it. Fork the rook and the bishop. Say rook d8, I take. Again, I'm probably looking at some slight advantage if I do that. Rook c1. Maybe nothing crazy. I don't know if I can even extrapolate too far into that one. Castle's queenside is my other move, but castle's queenside, I want to have something against rook d8. I'm just not 100% sure what I'm going to do against that move. I was saying b4, bishop e7. It looks like there should be something there, but what is it? What is it? It's knight e5. Black can always just take. And then knight d3 check move at the end is annoying. Another piece to the puzzle, I could play b4 right away. b4, bishop e7, and then knight e5. Although then I have to recalculate this line because there's bishop f6 at the end to help hold the knight. That probably doesn't work out so well. So I'm behind on the clock, but the position has simplified quite a bit. Not an excuse, but a lot of stuff has come off the board. Big transformations. b4, bishop e7, rook c1 then. Force black to play a rook to c8. Maybe that's the way to mess with black's coordination. b4, bishop e7, rook c1. Just hit the knight. b4, I don't think knight takes b4 is a concern. I think just bishop takes b7 there. Don't see that working out for black. So b4, bishop e7, rook c1. Because if I don't ultimately see a reason to play rook d1, maybe I'm just thinking I should play the rook to c1 instead somewhere. But I want to get b4 in. b4 would be a nice move to achieve. So b4, bishop e7, rook c1. Let's say rook a to c8. And maybe then just castles. Maybe then I just castle. Bishop f6, though. Still feels tough to milk something out of that. Okay, castles, rook a d8. That was my first instinct. I mean, king b1. A lot of those moves just look a little slow. But maybe. e4, bishop e7, then castles. That's the same thing after rook d8. Again, there's the knight e5 move. I'm also thinking about still. Knight e5, rook a c8, knight d7. I don't think I ever saw anything wrong with knight e5, did I? I mean, if knight e5, knight a5, and we trade, I can work with that position. I would actually like to play that position, I think. So maybe knight e5 is the move. Maybe after all, knight e5 is the thing to do. Knight e5, knight takes e5, bishop takes b7. And if knight d3 check, king e2. Oh, but you know what? There's always rook b8 in that situation. Yeah, that's an issue with that. So I don't think I can play that way. At least not yet. There's some cases where I could take and play knight e5 as well, but I don't see that panning out yet. So b4, bishop e7, rook c1. Castle's queenside, rook d8 is the other line I was looking at. Tough position because there's a lot of options. I'm trying to find something that gives me chances, but I got to admit, it's hard to find something concrete here that really seems convincing. And there's rook c1 as well, but always I think black can play a5 if they want. Not sure a5 is even that bad for black. They want to play that. So b4, bishop e7, rook c1. That might be the direction I'm leaning here. Gotta come up with something pretty soon. Castle's queenside. If I could find something after rook d8, I would 100% play castle's queenside, but just not seeing a whole lot. The rook d8 move shuts down a lot of the fun stuff I had in mind. But maybe I castle queenside, rook d8, and just play this king b1 move. Maybe I just do that, and I keep b4 and I keep knight e5 in reserve. Black could trade on d1 and play rook d8, though. My king's ultimately a little closer on the king side, so maybe I have some chances there. Also, yeah, I'm going to castle queenside. Not thrilled about these lines, and I used a lot of time there, but I want to have something in mind against one of the more obvious moves. Tea is definitely cold at this point. This is another game I'm kind of torn about because I like how my position has been shaping up the past few moves, but concretely, it's been hard for me to actually prove something. And I'm falling further and further behind on the clock. I know you guys are wringing your hands and screaming into your computer screen, some of you, about my time management, telling your significant others. Someone mentioned that they were watching a video and their girlfriend or wife or something. I was like, "Oh, is that John playing?" And the husband or boyfriend was like, "Yep." And she was like, "Is he behind on the clock again?" And he's like, "Yes, he is." So that is a common storyline. So full focus on rook d8. I'm just trying to figure out rook a to d8 specifically, what I'm going to do against that move. And I think I'm leaning towards king b1. It feels like such a weak move to play. But if I ever want to get at this knight on c6, I got to be able to play knight e5 or knight d4 when knight takes e5 followed by knight d3 isn't working for black. So that's what I hope to solve with that move. That might not even be that good, though. But it's kind of a useful wait and see move as well. Tuck the king. Maybe rook c1 comes into the picture again. At some point, I had to solve my king issues. So, yeah, and black does play rook d8. So, king b1. Is that what we're going with here? Even though it allows rook takes d1, rook takes d1, rook d8 with simplifications. Then I play rook c1. And then if f5, maybe I could take and play b4. There is bishop e4 check, though, among other things. I don't think I want to pull the trigger on b4 yet, on b4, because I think bishop e7 paradoxically helps black. Here's another thought. B4, bishop E7, B5, knight A5. We trade, and then I play knight E5, and I just try to get into the C6 square. How was that? B4, bishop E7, B5, knight A5. Trade. Knight E5 or knight D4? Probably knight E5. Keep F7 under greater control. That's a new angle. I didn't consider this angle, but maybe that's ultimately the best I'm going to get out of this whole bishop alignment situation. So B4, bishop E7, B5. It's pretty forcing. Knight A5. Trade. Knight E5. I give up control of the C5 square, but getting C6 is really nice. Staking out control of that square is very, very nice. There is knight A5, I suppose. I can't play knight takes F7. But I could play something like A4. Maybe. Should I go for that? This line of play looks interesting. It can be dangerous to mix it up like this, but B4, bishop E7. B5. Knight A5. Trade. Knight E5. A lot of stuff I'm swapping. But that C6 square is juicy. And there's also rook takes D8, which would force bishop takes D8. I think I might go for this. Yeah. B4. Now, there's no possibility of knight takes B4, right? Yeah, that's not going to work. So let's play B4. I figure after bishop E7, if I want to bail out, I can play king B1. But I'm coming around to B5, knight A5, swap, and try to get into C6. Quite simply. It's an awesome knight outpost if I can get there. So let's say base case, bishop E7, B5, knight A5, trade on B7, knight E5, knight A5, rook takes D8, forces bishop takes D8, and then let's just say I play rook D1. Bishop F6 maybe? Rook D7, I guess, is possible there. Try to get at the A7 pawn. Yeah, I'm going to have pressure. I'm going to have pressure on the 7th rank. I could see this F7 pawn still causing black headaches down the road. I don't think there's much of a chance black plays something other than bishop E7. Maybe they'll play bishop D6. Maybe. It looks a little shaky, but that is an option. On bishop D6, could consider knight D4, could consider king B1, could think about the B5 thing still, and just use an alternate route to get to C6. So say bishop D6, B5, knight A5, trade, knight D4. That's less strong than the knight coming to E5, I think, ultimately, but you can think about it. I think I'm leaning on bishop D6, play king B1, though, because I think king B1 would be useful to enable rook C1. But black evidently is thinking about it right now. Plays bishop E7. Okay, so do I go for the B5 idea? The big reveal. B5, knight A5, trade the bishops. Knight E5. And then at bishop F6, there's knight C6. And the eagle has pretty much landed. I don't think those end games are going to be easy necessarily, but I do think a lot of times I just go up a pawn in those end games. I'm really not seeing much better out of all this, am I? It's hard to come up with an improvement. And sending a knight to a fianchetto square is usually a good idea if you can force your opponent to do that. Knights don't do well on fianchetto squares. So let's go for it. Let's play it. Not much to do here. The knight a5 could take on d1, but absolutely no logic to giving me the file. Also, that probably loses a piece in the end. There's a rook d7. So I can almost pre-move bishop takes b7 here, but we're not going to do that. Yeah, trade. And knight e5 on deck. This is my big idea. And I think black's going to have some issues still to figure out because it's annoying. Knight c6, the pressure on f7. Knight d7 in some cases, maybe. The big issue for me is I do give up control of the c5 and a5 squares. So aesthetically, it looks nice to keep the pawn on b4, but in furthering my own piece play, it's probably worth it to try to get my knight to c6 to give black control of c5 and a5. So I think this phase of the game is where I have to be very dialed in with my time management because I've let the advantage on the clock for black slip to, pretty huge proportions, more than 10 minutes. Yes, it's an end game. Yes, pieces have been traded. We have the 30-second increment, but I don't want to be playing a blitz game when my opponent's playing a rapid game, even in an end game. I get the sense, though, black's probably going to start thinking quite a bit here because this doesn't look easy for black all of a sudden. Wasn't looking simple for black a few moves ago either, but I don't know. Those positions are tough because I feel like I had so many different ways to play. Black was more or less somewhat forced to do what they did the past several moves, whereas I had all these options. And that can be a burden, having all these tantalizing options in a position, but not finding anything real compelling. By the way, shout out to the Lee Chess 45 plus 45 streamers who have been streaming my games. I don't actually know who's streaming it this week. I didn't check the schedule, but so far for every game I played in the league, someone has been streaming live commentary of the game. So shout out to all the streamers who have done that. I think last week it was Flippy Flappy. And yeah, I'll check and see who it was this week. Maybe post it in the comments. And shout out to everyone who's joined the league, whether it's your first time, whether you're a veteran. I've had a lot of messages on the channel about people taking an interest not only in the league, but also longer games because of this level of detail that you can dive into and hopefully not, lose on time. Not get into horrible time pressure like me. But yeah, that's really, really good to see because you don't really get to plumb the depth of chess too often. Time controls people play. It's really only when you're starting to work up to these longer rapid games with a decent size increment that you can actually have the luxury of using your time and trying to wade through some of these possibilities. So, yeah, if you want to improve, make a point to play longer time controls. 100%. Okay, so if knight a5, that's probably the most obvious move to stop knight c6. I was going to take on d8 because black cannot take back with the rook due to knight takes f7. So knight a5, rook takes d8, bishop takes d8. And then I think rook d1 is a safe default move. Bishop f6, and then maybe rook d7, I was thinking. hit f7 again, hit a7. There's probably going to be some simplifications there. I think black will probably take my knight sometime soon in that instance. But I do feel like I must be pressing there. I must have some edge with the pressure on f7 and a7. And I really think it could be significant that black's king is on h8 rather than g8. Because f7 being loose in a lot of these cases, needing the protection of the rook, or black maybe even needing to play f6 somewhere, which is sort of a weakening move, that could be relevant. So we'll find out. I'm happy with this turn of circumstances, though. This turn of events, the past few moves. Finding b4, b5. I always was looking at b4, b5, but you kind of just say in your head, they can move their knight, trade the bishops. What did I really get out of that? But once I noticed the c6 square, this became a lot more interesting to me. Would love to see Wilson think to, 7, 8 minutes, maybe less. Trying to figure out a good way forward here. I would love to see that for me, just to clarify. I don't know what I would do as black. It's difficult for sure. Because you got to weigh knight c6 and you got to weigh the pressure on f7 and also the d8 situation. Knight a5 is a very natural move. But I think rook takes d8, bishop takes d8, rook d1 is going to be tough. Black can't play f6 there because of knight g6. So I think if black plays that way, they more or less have to move their bishop and try to exchange for my knight. Bishop f6. But after rook d7, I don't see any issues with knight b3 or knight c4 anywhere. Okay, that's maybe not totally true. So let's calculate a line. Knight a5, rook takes d8, bishop takes d8, rook d1, bishop f6, rook d7, bishop takes f6, bishop takes e5, bishop takes e5, knight c4 forks the bishop and the pawn on a7. But let's say something like bishop c3 there. Maybe bishop g3 is even better. I don't know. But let's say bishop c3. Black can't take the pawn. No, they could take the pawn actually on a3. I thought bishop b4 at the end, but there is rook c8 check. So that might be a type of line black has to consider. Knight a5, rook takes d8, bishop takes d8, rook d1, bishop f6. And if rook d7, quickly trade and try to fork my bishop and a pawn. That might be the thing to do for black. So I'm just looking at that in my head, trying to figure out what I would do against that. Maybe I don't play rook d1 right away. In that case. So knight a5. I still like rook takes d8 because I think forcing black to take with the bishop just must be useful for me. Could I think about knight c6 at that moment? Knight c6, take, and just say, hey, I've got a nice c-pawn. What are you going to do about it? There's bishop e7, rook d1, rook c8, though. Rook d7, rook takes c6, check. I'm not worse there because I'm going to win my material back, but am I pressing? I don't know. Maybe I could actually press there. Because f7, yeah, that f7 pawn being loose is really annoying for black. So knight a5, rook takes d8. I think I'll play that pretty quickly. But on bishop takes d8, that's the question. What do I do then? Bishop takes d8. I could play bishop c3 maybe at that point. Then there's bishop f6. Annoying. So knight a5. Rook takes d8. Bishop takes d8. Rook d1 is so natural. Bishop f6. Rook d7 is also natural. But can I solve bishop takes e5, bishop takes e5, knight c4? It feels loose for black. But none of that really matters in theory. Maybe I just play bishop b2 there, actually. I was allergic to that move because it looks like black can, simply trade whenever they want. But the advantage of that is on king takes, I still have a nice rook on the 7th rank. It's actually probably good. So, okay, knight a5. Wilson is under 8 minutes now. Knight a5, rook takes d8, bishop takes d8, rook d1, bishop f6, rook d7. Bishop takes e5, bishop takes e5. Knight c4, bishop b2. If rook c8, probably just king b1. I've got pressure there, undeniably. I mean, there's 2 loose pawns. Another nice thing about my pawn being on b5 is black can't ever play a6 or a5. Capture the pawn, so... Yeah, in some of these lines, black gets a short burst of activity, but then they have to reckon with the pawns being weak on the 7th rank. Knight a5. Rook takes d8, bishop takes d8, rook d1, bishop f6, rook d7, bishop takes e5, bishop takes e5, knight c4, bishop b2. Yeah, I'm cool with the trade. I'm cool with rook c8, king b1. Knight d2 doesn't do anything, just king. Oh, actually, knight d2, I can even take the knight because my rook's on d7. Okay, so I think I've worked out that line. At least how I'm going to proceed. What else could black reasonably do here? Bishop f6 right away, but that invites the knight c6 move, which I haven't looked at as much, but I just think black's not going to want to allow that. They got to activate their knight sometime soon as well. That's another thing they're probably considering. Knight d6, is that a move they could ever consider? Knight c6, rook c8, king b1. I still feel like I have great pressure there. They're loose. Okay, and we're going to be even on time here in a second. So I had a feeling they were going to start thinking because this does not look easy for black. Will black be able to put this thinking time to good use? I could see some cases where maybe black decides to allow knight c6 and then just moves the attacked bishop. So let's just say, it's even hard to say how this might go down, but some case where they can solve the rook issue, maybe take after knight c6 and then play bishop c5 with the idea that if I take on a7, they play rook a8. Gain a tempo on my knight, and then take on a3 at the end. Okay, so they might be trying to do something like that by playing king g8. So they, I guess, determine that the pressure on their f7 pawn is annoying in all cases. So do I just play knight c6 here without thinking much? That would be the obvious thing to do. And I'm not really sure what black has in mind against that. I would play it by now if this were a blitz game, but I'm really just making sure I'm not missing anything because this looks excellent. Because the problem with trading on d1 is my rook's ready to come into d7 after that. If I take on d8 first, that only gives black more options. I mean, are they going to play rook c8? But that just loses to rook d7. I don't know. Let's see what black has in mind. Remove the capture on d1. Maybe black's going to play rook takes d1, bishop c5. And then on rook d7, they're going to go knight d6 to attack my pawn on b5. Maybe that's going to be their bid for counterplay. And then there's some knight c4 type stuff, perhaps. Looks ugly, but that's perhaps what they have in mind. Yeah, I think they're going to do that. I don't see what else makes sense. Take, bishop c5. Supporting knight d6. Rook d7, knight d6. So shaky looking. But I see the appeal. At least they get some activity out of that. Now I'm looking, is there a way I can improve on that line if I go for that? Because I might not want to play knight d7 first, for instance. Or rook d7, I should say. Maybe I just take on a7 right away. There's even some weird stuff, rook a8. Well, let's force black to find it first. It's kind of weird to play bishop c5 and then knight d6 because it does look very shaky, but it makes some sense to try to target these queenside pawns. And it's a little annoying for me because my a4, my a3 pawn and b5 pawn are disconnected, so there is some urgency to try to solve that issue. Bishop c5, rook d7, knight d6. And I think a4 is a pretty natural move there. So if a4, still threatening to take on a7. Yeah, that's actually not really anything for black, is it? And they could play knight e4, try to make it complicated. But somehow I don't really buy it. And I wouldn't mind trading one of my kingside pawns for that a pawn. So bishop c5, they're under 3 minutes now, by the way. Bishop c5, rook d7, knight d6, a4. Another thing I'm wondering about is knight e4 at that point. That's how we could see some scenario where that happens, where they try to go after my king side, where I take the pawns on the queen side. Maybe bishop d4 at that point is interesting. Bishop c5, rook d7, knight d6, a4, knight e4, bishop d4. If bishop takes, take with the pawn to restrict their knight further. Knight takes f2. I play, let's say, rook takes a7. Yeah, they do play bishop c5. Okay, so this might happen. Now, do I have any move that's more challenging than rook d7? I don't think so. I could throw in a4 first. But the downside is on a4, knight d6, that blocks my rook. So I think rook d7 is just far and away the natural thing. And if I could play rook d7, knight d6, a4 right away, that would be the best case scenario, I think. Really keep the pressure on black. Rook d7, knight d6, a4. And on knight e4, this bishop d4 move, and just say, hey, you can have the f2 pawn. I'm solely interested in your queenside. It's pretty compelling because once I knock out that A pawn, I'm coming real fast down the board. Being a little cautious though, because last game I was overeager at a critical moment and it cost me. But this is a different type of position. My king is extremely safe here. And I want to hammer out the next move because I think this is going to be unpleasant for black when I do. So yeah, I'm going to go for this. Not a surprise, this move. And A4 probably won't be a huge surprise either, but we'll see. If knight A5, I can just take on A7. Knight A5 is kind of creative, though, because if I take the knight, then the bishop defends the A pawn. But rook takes A7, they trade, and then rook C8, and if D6, there's bishop D6 at the end. Okay, they play knight D6. Yeah, let's go A4 as planned. Defend the B5 pawn. Make sure there's never bishop takes A3. Now, I didn't really mention knight C4. Initially, that sort of weirded me out in terms of, am I going to have issues on B2, A3? But I think without the pawn on A3, it doesn't make a lot of sense anymore. So black's queen side is toast pretty much. They can't defend A7. So I think they're going to go for it with knight E4 and just try to gather some pawns over here on the king side. And then I was thinking bishop D4, but I'm also going to consider something like F3 first. The only problem there is they can play bishop takes E3 and then maybe wheel back knight C5. I want to keep this knight out of the queen side. So that's why I'm thinking knight E4, bishop D4, which is somewhat paradoxical. But bishop takes D4, pawn takes D4, and just say, hey, knight takes F2, that's fine. Okay, and black plays rook A8. Kind of goes passive a bit, but does reinforce the pawn. Okay. So if I take A7, what's going on? Rook takes A7. How's black playing this in the end? Rook takes A7, we trade. Knight E4, because I think that bishop D4 move is still strong in all these cases. Bishop D4, and if bishop takes, pawn takes, knight takes F2, A5, pawn takes A5, B6, knight D3 check, king B1. Okay, they have knight C5, I guess, at the end. Now, I could play a waiting move here. I don't have to immediately take A7, but if I don't take A7, black might play A6, is the thing. So let's keep that in mind. So rook takes A7, rook takes A7, knight takes A7, knight E4 probably remains critical. Could play knight C8 maybe? Knight C8, knight takes F2, B6. Probably win a piece, but I would like to avoid losing my kingside pawns. Bishop D4 right away is another consideration. If bishop takes, take the bishop. Not sure I quite buy that, though. So I think I'm going to take on A7. Just pondering with this knight E4 move at that point, what I want to do. Bishop D4. Bishop takes D4. Pawn takes D4. Knight takes F2. Let's say king C2 there. Knight E4. But there's knight c8 a lot of times, isn't there? Yeah, knight c8 should be a killer. I'm going to take. We're going to play this endgame. I don't think black can win my a-pawn. Didn't really look at any lines like that where the knight tries to maneuver to win the a-pawn. Doesn't seem like it's going to work. So I think black's got to go for knight e4. And I'm liking this bishop d4 stuff. As in, stuff the bishop. Force an exchange. Ooh. Thought, though. Do I tweak the move order? Maybe play king c2 first to encourage knight takes f2. Nah, probably not. Probably not. Just wondering if black can throw in e5 somewhere. So bishop d4, can black play e5? Idea, bishop takes c5, knight takes c5. Don't know that I can worry about that too much at the moment. I can always play bishop takes e5 if I need to. But it is a consideration. Also, do I just play knight c8 here right away? What's actually wrong with that? Knight c8, knight takes f2, bishop d4. There's also the added bonus. I have a5 as a threat. And then roll the b pawn. So I think this is between knight c8 and bishop d4. Ah, bishop d4 right away. Take, take. There's knight c3, isn't there? So that's another reason to play knight c8, I think, immediately. Knight c8, knight takes f2, bishop d4. I think that's what I'm thinking. Worth spending the little extra time here to think about that. I think that's looking good. Don't believe the knight's in danger of being trapped anytime soon. Yeah, let's go for it. My queenside pawns are starting to look real nice. And I always have a5 takes b6 if I want to purely play to win a piece. Still the pressure on g7 too that black may think twice about. Black's king in general is just looking very far away from the action. So I'm trying to arrange bishop d4 when I can guarantee knight takes b6 sometime in the near future. Currently up a pawn, but this remains tense. Takes f2. All right, so bishop d4. Let's do it. I don't see a really good counter to this. Black can check with their knight, knight d3, but then king d2 probably. If I could keep both pawns on the queen side, that's great. And now at this point, my king side pawns don't really matter. I'm threatening not only to take c5 and run the b pawn, but also knight takes b6. And with these queenside pawns so far away from that black king, black is, I think, busted. Let's pre-move the capture, though, just in case. Maybe knight e4 will be played. Then I can decide between taking c5 or taking b6. Black under 10 seconds. Plays knight d3. Okay, so king c2 or king d2. I think I like king d2 a little more because it stays out of range of the knight, but also moves my king forward. And I don't care about take d4, pawn takes knight b2 because I have knight takes b6, which is the whole point of this operation. Defends the a pawn. So I think king d2 is the move here. Let's play it. Keep the pressure on. Yeah, knight b2 right away, just loses the knight. Let's pre-move the pawn capture. I could think about taking the knight after bishop takes d4, but bishop c5 restricts my knight. I mean, a5 takes b6 is still on the table, but I don't want to calculate some ending where black has 2 pawns for the piece and I have to try to stop those pawns. Okay, knight b4. So knight takes b6. That might be the simplest. Well, that probably is the simplest move, but bishop takes c5 could be cleaner, actually. Bishop takes b5, pawn takes b5, a5, I'm thinking. Roll the a pawn. Bishop takes c5, pawn takes c5, a5. Black has a real hard time stopping that. Knight d5. Then I can switch it up and play b6. Yeah, black's not going to stop those pawns. Take a5. Knight d5, b6. Knight b4, I think, is forced then. And then a6. Switch it up one more time. Because those pawns advancing in tandem keep black guessing as to which pawn I'm going to push next. So, yeah, knight takes b6 surely wins. But I'm liking the pawn takes in a5. Past pawns must be pushed, right? There's also some deflection ideas with knight e7, but I don't even think I need to get into those. Let's take a5. Yeah, especially with my knights supporting a7. It's overwhelming. Probably knight d5. I can just actually push a7. A6 rather, because I control the b6 square, so really the only move for black is knight c7. Yeah, I think this is dealer's choice here, which move to play. b6 feels correct, though, because I like how it addresses the last move that black just played by threatening b7 again. Although, actually, did I see this in my head? b6, there's knight b4, back again. b7, knight a6, I guess, because if knight c6, knight e7, so they have to play knight a6. I can win by check and knight c6 then, I guess. But maybe a6 is more natural, actually. Yeah, I think a6. I think I'm just way too fast here. a6, knight c7, a7, with the idea of b6, quite simply, next move. Let's do it. Black has the c pawn, but the c pawn is always very slow. Yeah. B pawn rolling next. This knight being on c8 really unlocked a lot of stuff, even here in the final moments, because knight a8, it's nice that I can play b6. Thank you for the game. Thanks, Wilsonia. Wilsonia resigns. All right, so I moved to 4 out of 5 in the league. Interesting game. Time management wise and even opening wise, that was not shaping up all that well for me. But finding the b4, b5, trade the bishops, knight e5 operation, that was the turning point in this game. Because black never managed to solve their issues after that. Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks again, Wilsonia. Yeah, I'll be curious to see what the computer thinks. My guess is black was doing just fine out of the opening. Probably the e takes d5 stuff would have been better. But even the way black played it, maybe it was okay. I'm really curious about the whole b4, b5, trade the bishops, knight e5 thing. There might be some narrow path where black can survive that, but I admit it looked tough. And I can see why black ultimately played king g8, because that f7 point was looking rough in every case. But in the case that this is just strong for white, that makes me think that this queen takes d5 operation might have been even worse than it seemed. I mean, I can't claim that I just refuted black's play from here, but maybe black's looking at having to play something like pawn takes c5 to try to avoid some of these queenless middle games. Maybe there's something here for black. I don't know. It looked rough. Like maybe black can play f5, but you're tempting stuff like rook d7 in various cases, but maybe concretely f5 works. Because if rook d7, take, and taking here, even if there's bishop takes g7 in the air, I don't know. But yeah, my impressions are, I think black should have played the e takes d5 stuff, because that threat of stuffing my dark square bishop with d4 is always very annoying. And I was going to play bishop b5, maybe d4 myself, but I wasn't really buying my own sauce even. So yeah, I think this setup isn't a setup you play to get a big advantage for white. More of a surprise weapon with holding d4, just keeping that back a little bit. Aside from the opening and my time management in the first 75% of this game, I think I played well. But then again, I don't feel like I had to make a ton of tough decisions once I found the whole knight c6 operation. I think the position more or less played logically. Bishop d4, that's a nice move, bishop d4. But again, not terribly difficult, I would say. So let's see what the computer thinks. Let's take a look. All right. Hey, clean game. 0 inaccuracies, 0 mistakes, 0 blunders. I will take it after last week, 96%. 3 inaccuracies, 0 mistakes, 1 blunder for Wilsonia. Yeah, it looks like in the opening, black did have a fine position. This is, I think, where I'm at with my openings. So I have a lot of ideas still as, you know, a titled player who has worked on openings. But a lot of my theory is, especially in certain openings, is like a decade or more old. And I think this is a perfect example of a setup that I could get away with 10, 12, 13 years ago and actually beat the future Grandmaster Arjan Tari in the Reykjavik Open one year with this setup in a pretty nice game. So, you know, I could get away with that stuff back in 2012, 2013. But nowadays, I mean, you guys see the eval. I said this during the game. Like, the computer's not going to indicate an advantage here. I just don't think that cuts it anymore. I do think my openings need to be sharper than what you're seeing in these league games. So those of you wondering, John, why don't you go for GM? You know, like, you could totally make it. We watch you play. We like your style. You seem sharp. There's a lot of stuff I still got to tighten up. And openings, calculation, those would be the first things that I would have to work on a lot, to the point where I have to sacrifice everything else I'm doing in chess and probably sacrifice my personal life too. So yeah, c5, d5. How do the masters handle this particular move order? Yeah, queen c2 isn't played much, and probably for good reason. Only played 1% of the time here, but b3 first, I could see how this gives white greater flexibility in some of these types of lines. Because like I was saying, if this happens, where white takes on d5 and then plays d4. You'd much rather the queen be on d1 supporting the d4 point than having your queen on c2. And yes, c3 is a little bit weaker, but that's hard for black to exploit because we always have bishop d2 or sometimes bishop b2 if we need it. Even here, though, look at the eval. It's hardly anything. 0.1. I mean, you're looking at some isolated queen's pawn scenarios, maybe, best case, where white gets to trade the d pawn for the c pawn. Black has an isolated pawn on d5. Terrash type positions. So I think I was reaching a little bit, but then again, I didn't expect black to play e6. We saw that Wilsonia plays that, but I was expecting e5 or knight f6 more so than this. So yeah, not thrilled about the position I got out of the opening, but that was mostly a function of just the shallow prep that I did and my shallow opening knowledge in certain lines. Other lines like the Scandinavian, yes, I'm very booked up. I've been writing a course on that opening for 2 years. Sure, I know a lot about that, but there's a portion of my repertoire where I'm working with theory that's 10 to 15 years old. That's the last time I seriously studied those lines, and it really can show even in these league games. Yeah, so e takes d5. Again, I think this is just better because not only does it free up the light square bishop, it makes d4 such a palpable idea. You can see the engine suggesting this in many cases. And in 2 games that reached this position in the Masters database, white did play d4. What was I going to do here? I think I was going to play bishop b2, knight c6, and then a3 to cover this square. But yeah, look at that, d4, and black is clearly better. Take, c takes. And if I go knight b5 to hit this pawn, rook e8, and I'm asking for trouble. Yeah. There were flashes of a scenario like this going through my head when I played this opening and saw how fast and evidently confidently my opponent was playing in reply. So I'm very glad they didn't do that. But for those of you who maybe have QGD in your repertoire and you face this, I do think this is the most direct thing to do and just focusing in on trying to get d4 in. So yeah, very glad black played knight takes d5. I probably spent too much time around here. But okay, now we're in solid territory in terms of the Masters database. b6. Oh, h4 is an interesting move. I didn't consider that. Propping up knight g5. That looks like fun. I wish I would have thought about that. Try to get an attack going towards h7. That's the most popular move here. But I took, and yet again, I think black should take with the pawn. It's easy to say in hindsight, but I think black should take with the pawn. Oh, there's a Carlsen-Karyakin game. Is this a world championship game? So Magnus had this position as white, played bishop b5. But this also isn't much. This is nothing for white. Black's better. Yeah, and you see Karyakin went for d4. And it looks like Magnus was cramped after this and worse. I think this might have been a world championship game. So they got into this through a slightly different move order. But interesting to see that even the world champion, the former world champion, got into this position from the white side. Yeah, because in the absence of anything direct, it's just hard to prove an advantage here. I mean, I was mentioning stuff like d4, but I just never really bought it. Rook c8. I feel like that queen on c2 is going to pay the price. And I don't think black hates to play a position like this either. The hanging pawns, but very active position. There's some elements that don't quite fit here for white, like the bishop on b5. These pawns could be loose. So that was my feeling during the game, and that seems to be borne out, that black had a couple opportunities to play e takes d5 and should have taken them. Okay, interesting. So we're actually following a game, Hort versus Smejkal. Smejkal? I've seen that name before, but I don't know how to pronounce it. Czech GM? I think both Czech GMs. Smejkal and Hort. So it went exactly like my game, actually. And Hort played rook c1 in this position. Because remember, black can't take because of the pressure on c6. So what does the computer think is best here? Just look at this. So if you picked up one thing from this game, maybe this bishop h7, king h8, bishop e4 operation is the thing to keep in mind, because it looks like kind of a pointless check, right? If you're going to retreat the bishop anyways. But you saw the value of it later when that king, no longer defending the f7 pawn, actually cost black a vital tempo when they later played king g8 voluntarily. And there's other reasons to play this too, like you're stepping into, black stepping into the pin. It's uncomfortable against that dark square bishop, but that's something to keep in mind. Oh, wow. So in this position, there's d4, yes. There's also a rook g1. Okay, that's a tough move, rook g1, gearing up for g4. I thought g4 is a thing that you sometimes do in these positions because it can be a prelude to attacking on the queen side, or the king side, rather, with this nice bishop on b2. But I definitely didn't think about rook g1 here. If g4 is their f5, yeah, and then black starts fighting in the center. So I guess you play rook g1, and then if f5, you take and play knight e5. Force queen e8, and then you go g4. Wow, that's very creative. Yeah, that's a hard move to conceive of because it doesn't seem to fit the position. But I see the idea. g4, g5. Black has a hook that we can work with. Nice. Huh. Nice one there. But d4, I'm playing like Vlash the Milhort, rated 2600 in 1976, which is an enormous rating, even still, but especially for that time period. I'm on pretty solid footing. So Hort played rook c1 here. I played d takes c5, which the engine on shallow analysis says is a bit better. Yeah, so I really just struggled to figure out something challenging in the next few moves. Maybe I figured something out, but okay, queen e2 is a move here too. That's interesting. Try to play rook c1. Didn't think about that at all. Doesn't look like much, though. Maybe just slightly better placed pieces. So take, bishop takes. But I really spent a worrying amount of time here. I had 15 minutes, and I spent half of my time deciding what to do. I don't know, though. What do you guys think? Was my time management justified in the opening, in the middle game? I'd be curious what you guys think, because it's easy to construct these narratives after the fact. I do think what I mentioned played out exactly how mentally I thought it would once we got here. I called it. I was saying, well, I think they're going to start thinking at this point. And indeed, Wilsonia was actually the one in time pressure soon. But does that justify all the time I spent to get to that position? It's a little better for white, but nothing crazy. Yeah, I was looking at all sorts of stuff here. b4, knight e5, rook c1. Knight e5 I just never thought would work with this stuff. Yeah, king e2, rook b8, something like this. Just seemed like I had too many pieces loose. Yeah, maybe I could play this ending. My king's a little closer to the center, but it's probably a draw. So castles, rook d8 to rule out rook d7. What about f5? Because if takes, this probably works out fine for black. Okay, I guess I have a little pressure even here because of this nice knight. And if bishop takes g2, do I play rook g? No, rook d7. Ooh. Ah, opening up knight g6, king g8, rook takes g7 as a threat. So if black takes the rook, for instance, this is mate in 2. That is nice with that bishop assist. Okay, so black does have a few problems here after castles, and it makes sense. My pieces are more active. My king is closer to the center. b4 is on the table. So did I find the right line? It's saying knight d4, king b1, g4, lots of different moves. This g4 move, wow. I didn't really think about that. Knight d4, what did I not like about this? Trying for something like this and just play with the two bishops. Knight d4 crossed my mind, but did I think just rook c8? But I guess the pin issue persists, doesn't it? That's still a little uncomfortable for black. Yeah, I don't know why knight d4 didn't appeal to me more here, because that does look nice. I'm pretty sure I looked at rook c8 mentally and just discarded it at this point. But king b1 keeps the pressure on. Because even in the case black, let's say, trades, yeah, I'll probably always have this nice pressure towards their queen side or down the d file. So what about what I did? b5. I mean, that's still very close in evaluation. I'm going to bet there's a narrow path, like I was saying, some very narrow path for black to survive here. Well, multiple moves are offered. Rook c8, rook d1, king g8. What's this line? Rook c8 check, king b1, rook c7. Huh. A little rook maneuver to protect the 7th rank. Allow the knight in, but then does black play a6 or something? Or do they just move the bishop? They just move the bishop. Aha, because I guess if takes, there's always rook a8. No, not even. Take, knight a5. Hit the knight. Aha, and that guards the c6 square. And also knight d8 would even suffice to do that. Okay. That's not the easiest two-move maneuver. I mean, I can see why black didn't consider that or didn't think or didn't play that. Maybe they considered it, but didn't play it. Rook c7. Invite the knight in, but knight takes a7 is actually not that big of a threat in that case because of knight a5. Yeah, that's tough. That is tough. And what else? So king g8 is maybe not bad. I was focused on this line, knight a5. And I thought take, because if rook takes, there's knight takes f7. So bishop takes, rook d1, bishop f6. This is a line I was trying to solve for a while. Take, knight c4. Yes, and bishop b2 is the best move here. It took me a while to figure that out. I'm glad to see that, though. That's the only good move for white to keep a large advantage. Protect the bishop, protect the pawn. And the point is, even in these rook endings, black has trouble because I'm active and also going up a pawn. And you can see in the purest case how black's king on h8 hurts them with something like this. So, all right. So on Wilson's king g8, what's the line here? So in this position, black must play bishop d6. That is mandatory. Wait, did I think about that? Or was I only thinking bishop c5 as black played? I'm trying to remember now. I don't know if I thought about bishop d6 here. But the reasoning is pretty straightforward, I think. So if takes, rook a8. And then when the knight moves, you play bishop takes a3. Yeah, I don't know that I actually thought about bishop d6 in this instance. And why that's the case, I don't know. Maybe because it still looks shaky. Again, with this knight on b7, it's just not usually a square that the knight want to hang around on for very long, because it doesn't have that great a scope on b7, the Fianchetto square. Yeah, I guess e4 might make some sense. So that would have been interesting had black played bishop d6, because I can't play knight takes a7 right away. So bishop c5 might have been the decisive mistake. And like I said, I'm pretty happy with how this played out after this. Yeah, all these moves are good. Bishop d4, even knight takes a7 is good. I think I found a pretty clinical way to handle this, though. Because black did what I suspected they would do. Yeah, knight c8, I think, is a nice move. Overwhelming at this point, but I think this move is the cleanest. Invite knight takes f2, and then get at this queenside chain, because my queenside pawns are simply much more dangerous than any majority black has in the center or on the king side. Yeah, probably lost at this point. Knight d6. Yeah, something like this must be lost, right? Bishop d4. Start bringing up the king. I would think somewhere I can play a5 and then b6, get the king up, and win the game. Yeah, this was all over. Both moves win here. Knight takes b6, but this just seemed more straightforward. And black resigned because b6 is coming pretty much no matter what. Okay, so yeah, I'm fairly happy with how the back half of this game went. Not so happy with my opening selection, but to clarify, I don't think I'm unhappy because of this one game. It's just where I'm at in my chess. Like you really see how that can be the case for an IM even. I just haven't really played much competitively in the past 6 years. My last classical tournament was 2019. And I'm still playing these lines that are a little wishy-washy that can work out against low-rated opposition. But objectively, I'm just not getting much of an advantage sometimes, especially with the white pieces. With black, you figure it's okay to play for equality most of the time. But with white, you want to be trying to get some edge. And had black taken on d5 with the pawn, I wasn't getting that. In fact, I was going to be slightly worse had black played e takes d5 here, which is a pretty significant disadvantage already. The engine is saying half a pawn at this stage. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with some of the actual decisions I made in this game. Just the opening, my general opening knowledge could have been better. So let that be a lesson to my future opponents in the Lone Wolf League. Feel free to throw your best at me because I might not have studied it. Unless it's the Scandi. Then feel free to play e4. Go right ahead. All right. So thanks so much to Wilsonia for the game. Everyone I've talked to and played in the league has been super nice. So do check out the Lone Wolf League. Thanks to all the players, moderators, streamers. This has really been a joy. So I don't think this will be the last season that I play in this league. I don't know if I'm going to play the next season. I might need a little bit of a break, but I've really, really been enjoying this, guys. And if it has encouraged you to look at this league or play longer chess yourself, all the better. That really makes my day to hear. So do check it out if you haven't. All right. Would love to know your guys' thoughts. Thanks again to Wilsonia for the game. We'll see what happens next week in round 6. All right, guys. Take care.